Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to Harmony at Home. I'm Dr. Karen Parker, and it's so exciting to have you here for our very last day of our Harmony at Home series. We've got quite a presentation for you today. I would say what you're going to learn today is going to give you some pretty profound insights into not only how to interpret your child's behavior, but also how to kind of understand pretty much anybody in your life, even people at the grocery store. So let's take a moment just as we kind of come into this space, because I'm going to invite you to really get into your body in today's presentation, and just take a second and say hello and let us know where you're from. Welcome back. I want to make sure today, as we get started, before we get started, that you've got charts for all of your loved ones with you. So if you have not run a chart yet, you can quickly go to freehumandesignchart.com and run any charts you might need to run for people you love. That's fast, quick, and easy. You can do that while I review what we've covered so far. So on Monday, we talked about conditioning. We talked about how our perspective, and that perspective is really the story that you've internalized about yourself, as well as our cultural conditioning, how that perspective influences how we see our children. And I invited you into a new idea, a new framework for how you see your children. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into that today. So my invitation for you was to start looking at misbehavior as a form of communication, and that what's really going on with our kids and anybody in our life when they aren't doing what we want them to do, that there's always a possibility that they just don't know how to clearly communicate what it is that they need and want. So today we're going to talk about decoding that, right? Yesterday we talked about child development through the lens of the energy field, through the chakra system, and how when we understand the energetic needs and the evolution of the energy field, especially from birth to 7, and we can really see what's going on and what a child is really, learning and activating within them, that it starts to give us a different bit of a tack and a little bit of a different way to interpret what our kids are doing and why they're doing what they're doing. Before we get started today, I kind of want to start with an analogy. So here, we'll start with a little bit of a story. So imagine for a moment that you're a brand new nurse. You just got out of nursing school. You're a brand new nurse, and you're starting your first day at a doctor's office. And you've got 4 patients. They're all in different rooms, and they're sitting there waiting for the doctor to come to assess them and diagnose them. So the doctor goes into room 1 with patient number 1. And this patient is reporting that they have a stomach ache. And the doctor says, "Oh, I've seen that before. That's an appendicitis. Come in tomorrow at 7 and I'll take out your appendix." And then the doctor goes into room 2 and the patient says, "Oh, I have this really bad stomach ache." And the doctor says, "Oh yeah, I know what that is. That's an appendicitis. Come in tomorrow. I'm going to take out your appendix tomorrow at 10. In room 3, we got the same thing. Patient with a stomach ache. And that patient is saying, "Oh, it hurts so bad." And the doctor says, "No problem. You have an appendicitis. Come in tomorrow at noon. I'm going to take out your appendix." And in the last room, room number 4, there's another patient with a stomach ache. And the doctor walks in and the patient says, "I have a stomach ache." And he says, "No problem. Come in at 2 and I'll take out your appendix." As a nurse, you might be a little concerned, right? That this doctor seemingly has a one-size-fits-all approach to stomach pain. And who knows, right? What's the real source of the stomach pain? Is it food poisoning or is it appendicitis? Who knows, right? The reason why I want to share this story is because we are kind of trained as parents, as humans, to approach our children's misbehavior in the same way. We study books and we learn about misbehavior and we think about and talk about consequences and applying consequences and different tactics and strategies that we can use to manage misbehavior. And what we oftentimes neglect to do is to get to the root of why is our child doing what they're doing. We don't diagnose the source of the misbehavior. And so our kids are metaphorically coming to us with stomach aches, and we're treating them all the same without really getting underneath why is my kid doing what they're doing? Why are they behaving the way in which they're behaving? So today we're going to really unpack some very practical, very interesting ways that you can begin to understand how to figure out why is my kid doing what they're doing, and how, as a result of that, how you can handle it. So let's get started. So, all right, let's talk about tantrums, power struggles, misbehavior, and human design. All right, before we get started, let's do our housekeeping. Again, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, I invite you to join us. We've got some great reflections and comments and storytelling happening there. So join us in our Facebook group. It's a good place to get in there and get some more questions answered and deepen your connection to what we're covering and talking about today. We also have in our Facebook group a daily replay and reflection post, which allows you to sort of sit for a little bit and really think about what have you learned today. And again, keep that conversation flowing after our daily live sessions. You will have a workbook if you haven't gotten a copy of it yet for this series. And our lovely team Quantum will be posting in the chat a link to that workbook so you can follow along. If you missed any of our sessions on Monday and Tuesday, the replays will be posted. The replays for day 1 and day 2 are already posted on the replay page. If you watch the replay on YouTube, underneath you can post any questions that you might have about the material. We'll make sure we work on getting your questions answered so that if you have questions, we can make sure you get answers to your questions. Every day we're selecting 2 people a day at random. So we're going to be picking 2 people today as well to receive a Quantum Human Design card deck, an Understanding Human Design book. That's the red book. The Human Design workbook. That's the new blue book. And an encyclopedia of quantum human design. That's a stack of books this tall. At the end of today's call, I'm going to announce, or actually Hannah's going to announce our day 2 giveaway recipients. And as I said, check the replay page if you missed anything or you want to review anything. Also, I want to just share, I'm not mad if you want to take a screenshot of any of the slides as they come up. In some of the slides, there's a lot of information. So if you want to have that for review, I will not be mad. So please feel free to do that. All right. We started on Monday with talking about how do we truly see our children? If we're really looking at our children, what lens are we looking at our children through? And so I talked about how to really see and really make our children feel seen and heard and loved, we need to be looking through a window, if you will, a metaphorical window with 4 different panes. And those 4 different panes give us a little bit of information that can help us intelligently and really effectively interpret why our children are doing what they're doing. The first lens that we're going to look through is through the lens of quantum human design. Your child's unique energy blueprint is contributing a lot to what they need, how they're behaving, how to best support them, how to get them to sleep well, how to get them to eat well, how to get them to engage with the world in a way that's aligned with who they really are. In our Family Coach Certification Training Program, you'll get a lot of information about tailoring parenting specifically to design, and I'll share a little bit more about the Family Coach Certification Training Program at the end of the presentation today. Before I take your questions, I do just want to remind you that the registration for that program is open. It will be open until September the 26th. This is a program that we only do every other year, so this is the year to do it before 2027. The second window pane that we look through is child development. Yesterday we talked a little bit about that. We looked at the energetics of child development. Obviously, you also want to look at the actual physical and concrete milestones as well. Why do kids do what they do at certain ages? And when you understand what they do at certain ages, it helps you understand why they're doing what they're doing and how you can best support not only their evolution and growth on a physical level, but how you can help them sustain that growth and be healthy on an energetic level as well. We talked about personal conditioning, how sometimes as parents, We bring our own experiences, our own stories as parents, our own expectations about what our parenting journey is going to be like or should be like. And that can sometimes influence how we see our kids. And finally, in the final window pane, when we look through the bottom right window pane, we see that our children are oftentimes acting out because they have unmet needs. And that our job as parents becomes not to punish, but to guide behavior, and most importantly, help our children discover appropriate and healthy ways to learn to get their needs met. Again, I want to just invite you into how different would your life be? How different would your life story have been if you had been able to ask for what you needed and wanted appropriately? If you had been able to go to your boss or your parents or your friends or your partners, your lovers, and say things like, hey, I feel like my attention cup is kind of empty and I'd really like some connection with you. Or, hey, I'm feeling really disempowered in some key areas in my life. And, I came home today and I stormed through the house and I was in a really bad space and I was really trying to control everything. And, that's not really about you or what's going on in this household. I'm feeling disempowered and I need to find some place to feel powerful in my life. And I took it out on you and I'm sorry, right? How different would our lives be if we understood our core needs and had the ability to effectively communicate those needs to the people we love and to ourselves, right? And to ourselves so that we could get them met. I want to just say, for some reason, whenever I teach this material, it sometimes can be triggering. And I'm just putting this here because usually what gets triggered is a grief about realizing and recognizing that maybe in your own life story, you weren't really seen and heard and didn't really get your needs met in the way that you needed to get those needs met. So this awareness, which we sometimes label as being triggered, and even this grief, I want to just share with you is actually a really powerful first step in healing. Sometimes when we have upsetness and emotional energy around our parents, our family, our how we were parent, how we're trying to parent, we feel all this stuff and it's sort of this big amorphous blob. And we don't always know what it is that's bothering us, but we're bothered. I had that experience this morning, right? I was bothered until I realized, oh, I'm bothered because there's a lot of clutter in the house right now, right? When we can start to put language and understanding and words and see what it is that we feel that we don't have, or we feel a missing part of, and we start to go, oh, I needed this and my parents didn't get that. That awareness is actually a really important, powerful first step in the healing process, because now you can start to go, oh, I have this unmet need. I had this unmet need. And nobody understood that I had this unmet need. And oftentimes they didn't understand because maybe they had that same unmet need too. And they just thought, and as we learn, that's just how life is, right? You have this certain need. Well, you're not always going to get your needs met. That's just how life is, right? We internalize that story. What you're going to learn today is a vocabulary around your needs. And through the lens of human design, you're going to see in the chart where some of those needs maybe come from. And hopefully, by the end of the presentation today, you'll have some ideas on how you can better communicate your needs and maybe even get some of those needs met in a healthier way. So we started on Monday talking about why do children misbehave? And we talked about the collective belief systems that we have. And these systems are these beliefs are insidious. They're interwoven into so much of our culture, including sometimes how we grandparent or we were grandparented, including in our education system, and included even in our own parenting. And we talked about how some of these collective beliefs are things like, oh, children misbehave because they're spoiled, right? How many times have we had a thought like, oh, that's a kid spoiled, right? You let that kid run wild, he's spoiled, right? Children misbehave because they're inherently bad. You just sometimes give birth to a bad one, right? Or usually we have one kid, we have that one kid in the family, like that's the bad kid, right? Children misbehave because they're just like their mother or they're just like their father. Start thinking about that belief, especially if there's tension in your relationship or a divorce and you divorce your child's mother or father, and now you're telling them, oh, you're just like your mother or you're just like your father. I see that play out a lot in relationship dynamics, post divorce, co parenting dynamics. What does that say to the kid? Right? You left my dad, and now you're telling me I'm like my dad, right? Children misbehave because they're jealous, needy, clingy, whiny, right? We have beliefs in our culture that that's how kids behave when they're little, right? Or they have ADD or some other psychological issue. And again, I'm not saying that neurodiversity and other aspects of brain development or brain challenges can lead to don't lead to misbehavior sometimes, but your children are oftentimes misbehaving, usually misbehaving for far different reasons than what we realize. The challenge with having this belief system is that it puts the onus basically on getting your child to behave on you, the parent. It becomes your job to make the child behave. And if you can't control that child, and oh my God, who can, right? Unless you're using brute force, well, there are a lot of kids that are uncontrollable in that way. And what happens is when our children misbehave, we internalize it as, oh, I'm failing, or as a parent, or I'm a bad parent. I want to encourage you today and say, your child is not misbehaving because you are a bad parent. Your child is most likely misbehaving because they have unmet energy needs and they're still little. They're still learning how to express those needs. My 4-year-old grandson right now, I have a granddaughter who's 9 months old, and my 4-year-old grandson who's just barely 4. He just turned 4. He's so flippin' jealous. Oh my gosh, he's so jealous. He does not know how to say, I'm feeling really jealous. I'm really questioning my lovability and my place in this family. I'm really feeling like, Mom, you don't have the time you used to have for me, and I'm feeling disconnected from you. He can't say that yet, right? So what does he do? He pushes the baby over, right? Or he's like, nice baby, nice baby, nice baby, right? He goes a little too far with the patting on the head, right? Because he has energy needs and he's 4 and he's still teeny tiny. And even though he's way bigger than the baby, sometimes my daughter forgets how teeny tiny he is. And he doesn't have the words yet to really tell her, hey, could you please take the baby back? Because I'm not liking this dynamic at all and I'm feeling really left out, right? Our kids are born as children. They're born as babies. And they have to learn how to communicate effectively. And in the beginning, they don't have those words. And in the beginning, you didn't either. And when they don't learn over time, and let's be really clear, parenting is a long-term journey. My oldest kids are 35. I'm still parenting in some ways, right? I'm still thinking long-term parenting goals here, right? That when we are parenting our children, we need time and we need strategies to effectively interpret our children's behavior so that we can support them in A, learning how to get those energy needs met appropriately, and B, learning how to eventually be able to ask for what they need and want. It's huge. It's huge. If they can learn to do these two things, they're going to have such good relationships in the world. They're going to have such a healthy life, right? Children misbehave because they have basic needs. By the way, you have these same needs too. These are human needs. They're not just children's needs. They're human needs. We all need to feel lovable. We all need to feel valuable. We all need to feel powerful and capable. We all need to experiment and explore to a certain degree. And if you are a 3rd line profile or a 6th line profile, you need that 10x. And we all need attention, presence from the people we love. Presence. And so much about human design is about getting you back in your body so that you can be here now and be present, not only to your family and the people you love, but also present to whatever the cosmos is moving through you and inviting you to fulfill on the behalf of the cosmic plan. So every child's going to get these needs met in different ways depending on their human design. So when we start talking about these needs, our own unique energy blueprint is going to influence how we experience these needs. This is why, I'm going to get out of here for just a second. Think about this for a minute. How many of you have siblings? Just post in the chat. How many of you have siblings? I have 2 siblings, right? I have an older sister who is from my father's first marriage. She was just my soulmate sister, right? And I have a younger brother. My younger brother and I grew up in the same household. And when my brother starts talking about my parents, sometimes I'm like, did we grow up in the same household? Do we have the same parents? Like, his interpretation of what happened in our household growing up and the family that we lived in is like radically different than mine. And I understand now, because I understand charts and understand how energy needs work, that his interpretation is so deeply and profoundly influenced by his chart. I have a defined G to the throat. My sense of lovability is very different than his. My sense of lovability really comes from my ability to accept who I am, right? And that's been a journey, right? He has an open G. So his default programming is to question his lovability. And so he grew up in the same household with me, with the same parents. And honestly, I think my mom is very biased towards him, right? With the same parents. And his takeaway is he was not loved. And I'm like, how did you get that out of that, right? He got that out of that because he has an open G. And so our design influences how we interpret the world and how we see it, and ultimately also what we need. And so when we can start to understand what the chart is saying and how the chart influences how we see and feel and sense and experience the world, then we can start to support our children in really feeling genuinely seen and heard and loved and valued for who they are and for how they are, for who they are and for how they are. So this chart then becomes a map, right? And it's a map that shows us how you process energy. And ultimately, when we understand that map, it gives us information so that we can interpret energy in such a way that we feel lovable, we feel valuable, we feel powerful, we trust ourselves, we understand our emotions, we're authentic, and we feel safe being authentic. We're courageous, we're energetic and vital, and we know how to make the right choices for us. This is the 9 resiliency keys that we talked about on day 1, right? When we are resilient, we feel lovable, valuable, powerful, we trust ourselves, we understand our emotions, we're authentic, we're courageous, we're energetic and vital, and we know how to make the right decisions for us. When we support our children in effectively getting their needs met, and we do it through the lens of their human design and their child development, then we support them in cultivating these energies so that they can grow up to be resilient. They can grow up to be healthy and strong. So again, misbehavior is a way of expressing unmet energy needs. And our role then as parents isn't to control their children's behavior, because you really can't, but to rather help our children learn appropriate ways to get these needs met. So our goal today is not going to be so much to figure out how to manage behavior, because that's a whole 2-week curriculum studying every day, but rather to really start diagnosing our children's behavior today. So my goal for you today is that when you hang up from Zoom today, you're going to walk away with a good understanding of how to interpret and diagnose, why is my child doing what they're doing, so that you can start figuring out how do I support my child in getting this need met appropriately. The very first thing you're going to do, and this is the tricky part for a lot of us, is you're going to have to get in touch with your emotional energy. You're going to have to feel inside of yourself your emotional response to your child. So our children grow up in a feedback loop. If you think about a baby is born into a feedback loop. And that feedback loop kind of goes like this. Baby cries, parents come running, right? Baby has a need, so baby expresses that need through crying. As we learn more about our baby and our baby starts to grow, we start to be able to hear there's different cries that mean different things, right? That's the beginning of communication. But they're born into a feedback loop. Babies do something. By the way, let's be really clear. Babies are not laying in their cribs going, how can I manipulate my parents today? That was a thing my mom used to say when I had my babies. She'd say, oh, he's just manipulating you to get your attention. I'm like, no, babies don't manipulate you. They're not laying there manipulating you from their crib. They're in a feedback loop. And that feedback loop is essential. And your response to that feedback loop is essential. If your baby figures out that you're not responding to their needs, their developmental wellness starts dropping off pretty quickly. Okay, so babies need us to respond as part of health, as part of growth, as an essential part of growing into a thriving toddler with a healthy nervous system. What happens over time is that as our babies mature and as our relationship matures, children learn from that feedback loop that when I do specific things, I get a specific response from my parent. I want to be really clear that everything we talk about today is not conscious. Your children are not consciously sitting there going, wow, I'm not getting any attention here. How can I irritate and annoy my mother? None of this is conscious. This is learned behavior from feedback loops. So let's be very, very clear about that, because our children are not intentionally bothering us, okay? Even though it feels like that sometimes, they're not. They are in a feedback loop. And what happens is they know you really well. They need to know you. They've needed to understand you in this feedback loop from the beginning because it's important for their survival. And what they've learned is that when I do certain things, my parent responds in a certain way. And when I have certain needs, if I do these things and my parent responds a certain way, my parent is responding to an emotional trigger. Okay, my parent is responding to an emotional trigger. Now, here's the thing. Children need our responsiveness. And if they have a need and they're communicating that need, and that need is not getting met in a way that's fulfilling that need, they oftentimes will do things that are disruptive, misbehavior, right? They'll do things to get our attention in some way, shape, or form, because to a child, a negative response from a parent is better than no response at all. Okay? I'm saying this not to make you feel guilty. I'm saying this because in the feedback loop that is parenting, through the lens and the perspective and the narrative that you have and that your child has learned from, if our children are misbehaving, they're not misbehaving because they want to manipulate you. They're misbehaving because they'd rather get in trouble and get something from you versus nothing from you. And so if they're still triggering you and you've got this feedback loop with misbehavior that's not working, it's still okay. It's still okay. It just needs some refinement. It's still a way of saying, I'm loved. Your child is still saying, I know that if I do this, I'm loved and I'm getting responded to, right? That's really good. That's what kids need. So what happens is when children have specific needs, specific emotional needs, they learn through that feedback loop to create specific emotional responses in their parent, okay? They learn to create specific emotional responses in their parent as a way of getting their needs met, okay? For us as parents to effectively diagnose our child's behavior, we have to first get in touch with that very first moment when we experienced our emotional reaction to our child's behavior. Okay, so it's not about how the behavior looks. Because if we go by how it looks, which is what we learn to do in a lot of parenting programs, and we address it by how it looks, we might be missing the root cause. And some misbehavior can look very much like, let's say, a power struggle, when in fact it's not a power struggle, it's a cry for attention. And when you learn how to diagnose it within yourself based on how it makes you feel, then you get to be more effective in how you respond to your child's needs. So today we're going to talk about the 4 mistaken motivations. Those mistaken motivations are manifestations of core energy needs, in our children. So we're going to talk about the mistaken motivations. We're going to talk about the emotional assessment of those mistaken motivations. Then I'm going to show you where some of these needs show up in the chart. So the 4 mistaken motivations are: number 1, power; number 2, attention; number 3, inadequacy; and number 4, revenge. Now, let me first start by saying, usually in your family, you'll have one kid. If you have more than one kid, you'll have one kid that specializes in one of these 4 mistaken motivations, and it's usually a different one. Okay, so if you've got one kid that's doing power, the other one will do attention. You probably also have a primary mistaken motivation. And usually the kid that is driving you the craziest is the kid that has the same mistaken motivation as you, because it sets up this very interesting dynamic. And you might find when you look at the charts today that there are aspects in the charts that are similar between that kid, right, and you. So, all right, so again, it's not about how the behavior looks. It's about how the behavior makes you feel. All right, so let's go through these mistaken motivations and how it makes you feel. So if you have a child who is acting out of a need for power and is doing the mistaken motivation of power, your response to their behavior or their misbehavior is to feel like you have a desire to overpower them. How might that look? They might say, "I'm not going to eat my peas." And your response might be, "Oh yeah, you want to watch me make you eat those peas, right? You're going to eat those peas if it's the last thing I do. You're going to sit at this table all night, even if you fall asleep at the table, and you're not going to leave this table until you eat those peas," right? That's the trigger experience of power inside of you. You will feel like in response to your child, you want to overpower and control them. This is a very interesting mistaken motivation. If your mistaken motivation is power and your child's mistaken motivation is power, woo boy, you've got to learn how to disrupt that power struggle, right? The second mistaken motivation and the emotional diagnosis, the mistaken motivation of attention. If your child is craving attention, it can feel, their behavior will make you feel irritated and annoyed. Think flies, right? Where you sit down, it's summertime, there's flies in the house, you got the fly swatter, they're buzzing around, they're driving you crazy. It's inevitable, right? You're going to get out that fly swat and smash them. You're not going to do that to your kids, obviously, but our kids are creating irritation and annoyance just like that fly. And again, remember, negative attention is better than no attention at all for a child. It's also interesting to note that if your child is doing attention as a mistaken motivation, especially if they're tag teaming with their sibling, it's often the mistaken motivation of attention that's creating sibling conflict. Especially, it's not so bad now. Well, it's kind of weird. It's different nowadays. So when my kids were little, we didn't have cell phones. We had corded phones. I had a phone in the kitchen. It was in the pantry. It had a really long cord, right? And if I ever got on the phone for anything, the kids would start fighting. Like it's like they knew psychically, oh, she's not available to give us attention. Let's go have a fight. Right? Again, they're not doing it on purpose. I remember so many hours of like trying to, run my business in the pantry with the door shut with the corded phone, just listening carefully, like, are they killing each other? Are they killing each other or no? Right? And hope usually they weren't, but sometimes I would have to hang up because they were. Inadequacy is the next mistaken motivation. And this one is a little bit tricky to diagnose because when our children are experiencing the mistaken motivation of inadequacy, we genuinely don't know what's going on. Sometimes as parents, we feel pity We feel confusion. We don't know if there's a genuine problem or not. And so we're confused, like, do I help them? Do I not help them? Am I over helping them? Sometimes we over help them because we can't deal with the inadequacy and all of the stuff that comes with inadequacy. And we get into a habit of of really taking care of our kids, doing more for our kids than they should be doing for themselves. So it's a very interesting one to diagnose. But definitely if you start to feel like pity and confusion, that's oftentimes inadequacy. And revenge, which is the fourth and final mistaken motivation, whenever our children are doing revenge, and by the way, you won't see this one so commonly. Revenge is oftentimes, if we have a child that's doing revenge, except for, I would say, except for when you have a new sibling, then sometimes that happens. It's kind of normal for young children to do revenge when there's a new baby in the house. But if you have a child that's consistently acting out of revenge, underneath that, what's going on is they're questioning their lovability. And usually what's happened is they've done power and they didn't get a response. They did attention and they didn't get a response. They did inadequacy and they didn't get a response. So now they're like, oh, there's no feedback loop here. I'm not loved. And so what they do is they'll do things to intentionally hurt you. Because if they can hurt you and you react to being hurt, then they know, oh, at least I still have a little bit of an inroad to this person's heart, right? And so you'll see revenge. Your emotional response to revenge is you're going to feel like you want to hurt your kid back, right? I think probably one of my favorite revenge situations is I saw a kid one time really into revenge for good reasons, came up, I was having a conversation with his mom, and he came up to his mom and he said, why are you so fat? And it wasn't funny, it was serious. And she was furious, right? And embarrassed. And I was watching that. And of course, in my mind, I'm looking at, oh, this kid has got revenge going on here. And that revenge is coming from a pain within his own heart. He's questioning his lovability. He doesn't know how to say, hey, do you love me? Or maybe he doesn't want to ask. So he's hurting his mom and other people sometimes because he knows that if he can get a response, he's still got an inroad to his mom's heart. So I'm going to go through in the next few slides all of the mistaken motivations in a little bit more detail, and then I'm going to look at where might you find some of these mistaken motivations on the chart. And again, I want to stop here because this is really, really important. The chart is a guideline. When we look through that window pane, it's only one pane in the window, right? There's 4 different viewpoints, 4 different funnels through which we're seeing our kids. And so we're going to look at charts, but do not diagnose your child from the chart. Diagnose your child from how their behavior makes you feel. And that means sometimes before you can even effectively respond to that misbehavior, you have to really get in touch and figure out, how did this make me feel? I have done coaching with parents sometimes, and I'll say, so when your child did this, how did you feel? Mad. Okay. And before you felt mad, how did you feel? Mad. Okay. And when they first did this thing, how did you feel? Mad. Okay. And that's true. We feel that way, right? But I want to really encourage you to get practiced when your children are doing things that are not working, to take a step back and to really get into, okay, when this first happened, how did I feel? Oftentimes we ignore that first emotional thing, right? If they're annoying us, we're like, whatever. I've still got stuff I got to do. I got to get this stuff done, right? And then we escalate, right? So I want to get you practiced into checking in with, where was the flashpoint in the problem? And how did it make you feel? And yes, look at the chart, because it's definitely going to reveal tendencies to us, but the chart should never, for anything in the entire human condition, be used as a diagnostic tool. Your chart is a correlatory tool. It's about correlations, not causation. So don't look at a chart and be like, oh, this child's going to have power problems. You don't know that. We don't know that. And there are lots of factors that go into somebody's choices and somebody's behaviors. So we're going to look at the chart as a correlation, not as a causation. So, all right. All right, let's start first with the mistaken motivation of power. So here are some things you might see. This is how the behavior might look. This is not about how it's going to make you feel. I'm just showing you how it might look, but you can have something that looks very much like attention, and it can end up being power if it makes you feel like you want to control that child, right? But generally speaking, mistaken motivation, if you have a child that's doing mistaken motivation, they can be stubborn, they can be argumentative, they can feel like they've got to win, and then of course you also got to win, and then you both got to win, and then you have a power struggle. They can lie, cheat, and steal, sometimes right in front of your face. They can be openly disobedient and oppositional. Examples of how that might look. As a parent, when your child is doing the mistaken motivation of power, you might feel despairing, challenged, or threatened. You might feel angry. You might feel like you have to control this child. You might feel like you have to show this child who's really the boss, right? And you might be determined that you're not going to let this kid win. Like, these are some of your own internal responses to your child's need for power. Remember, we all need power. Remember that we go through 2 developmental seasons growing up, toddlers and teens, where power, learning how to be powerful, is essential and important to our well-being. Here are some power markers in the chart. These are some factors that you might see in a chart that might make a child or a grown-up more prone to a need for power. The first one is if you are a manifester or a manifesting generator type, or if you have a child who is a manifestor or a manifesting generator type, or in quantum human design, we call those initiators and time benders. If you have a child with a defined will center, that's this over here, right here, this triangle on the chart. If you can see my cursor. Hannah, can they see my cursor? Is it moving?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. Just checking. So you'll have a defined will center. If you have somebody who is emotionally defined, so again, if you follow my cursor, if you go over to the right-hand side of the chart, if you have a colored in triangle on the right-hand side of the chart, emotional definition can sometimes also be a source of power or a need for power. Now we're going to talk about channels. There are a couple of channels associated with power. If you have this channel here connecting the root center and the spleen center, this one in the middle is called the 2838. This channel, if you have a child that has this colored in or half of the channel colored in their chart, they may also be more prone to power struggling. And if you have a child that has this channel right here connecting the will center, that's the little triangle on the right, to the throat center, this channel right here coming off the top, the 2145, this also can be a dynamic that creates a need for power within the chart. If you have a child who has the mistaken motivation of attention, here's what that behavior might look like. Your child might be a nuisance. They might be a show-off for the class clown. They might be lazy. Think about it. If they're lazy and they're not doing what they're supposed to do, what do? We coax, right? Don't forget it. Come on, do this thing, right? They get looped in. We get looped into like, come on, come on, come on. And that's sometimes an inappropriate way to get attention. They might be hyperactive. And they've oftentimes learned to associate love with attention, right? And oftentimes what happens, and this is interesting to think about, when our kids are good, right? When our kids are good, we're like, we tiptoe past, like, ooh, I don't want to disturb these guys, right? We don't actually, we try not to disrupt the good thing that's happening. But when they're bad, right? Then we give them lots of attention. And so you can see there's a feedback loop that gets created there, like, oh, I get it. When I'm misbehaving and I'm doing things I'm not supposed to do, and I'm jumping on the couch or I'm climbing on the furniture, mom's getting a rise here. I've got a rise out of mom. This is a good way to get attention. I'm going to keep doing this, right? Again, not conscious. It's not conscious. They're not plotting this out. It's unconscious. But oftentimes what happens when you have a child that has the mistaken motivation of attention is they've learned to associate love with attention. So they believe when I get attention, I feel loved. They might whine. By the way, it's developmentally normal for 4-year-olds to whine. So if they're 4 and they're whining, might be attention, might be being 4. And they might be, and this is an interesting one to pay attention to because we also, again, don't always think this one is a problem. They might become people pleasers, right? They get lots of attention for being good. And that's fine. But if you grow up and you internalize that and you don't learn how to set good boundaries and you spend all your energy people pleasing because that's how you learn to be loved and get recognition and attention, that's exhausting, right? How many of us have had to unlearn that pattern? If you are a parent and you have a child who is doing the mistaken motivation of attention, you might give them undue service. You might remind them often, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, coax them. You will feel annoyed. You might feel drained by the child, and you might feel irritated by the child. Oh my God, can you just think, right? Here's some attention markers that you might see in the chart. Number 1, this is a throat center. If this throat center is white on a chart, we call that an open throat. Open throats need recognition and attention. This can also be true for a non-motorized throat. And just to keep it simple, projectors, generators, and reflectors, or orchestrators, calibrators, and alchemists, all have non-motorized throats. So those 3 types are more prone to needing extra attention. An open G center sometimes needs attention and recognition. Or a defined G center, down here you'll see we have a defined G center that has a connection to the throat. So you'll see, if you see this G center, you'll see there's through these little channels, it's connected to the throat center. That can also be a configuration where somebody actually needs, by design, extra attention. So a fun fact, the family that I married into, my husband, his 2 brothers, and his sister all have open throats. Not like open throats, white throat centers. Literally all of their kids, all of my husband's children, all 4 of his biological children, plus all of their cousins, all of his nieces and nephews, all have non-motorized throats and open throats. When we sit down to dinner, it's all these people talking at each other louder and louder and louder. I have a motorized throat. I don't have the same need for talking and attention. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. And learning to live with someone with an open throat and knowing my husband has a need for attention. When he gets attention, he feels loved, right? And so I have learned that when he comes in at the end of the day from the office, that if I sit down and spend focused time with him, I like fill his little cup and then his little cup is full, and then he can go about the evening and he's not doing things that are provocative because he's got provocation in his chart to get attention. Proactive, right? The next mistaken motivation, the mistaken motivation of inadequacy. This one's a little trickier to diagnose. Okay, so let's walk through this because, again, remember, you're going to feel confused by your child with inadequacy. The child might act like they just want to be left alone because they don't want to talk through what's going on. They seem overwhelmed. They're like shutting down. That sometimes can be a symptom of inadequacy. They might act helpless. And sometimes that helplessness is confusing because you know darn well they can do it, right? If you go say, hey, can you take this chair and put it back where you got it? And they're like, I can't. But you're like, but you just did it 10 minutes ago to bring it in here, but now all of a sudden they can't. That can sometimes be inadequacy. They oftentimes will say, I feel stupid in comparison to others. And every time they go out and experience the world, they come back home and they talk about how stupid they are in comparison to everybody else. If they hit an obstacle, they'll give up and not participate in activities. They oftentimes do this, and I see this in adults with inadequacy too. They'll set goals that are so high, way too high, and it's almost like they set themselves up to pre-fail. They know they can't meet that goal, and so they don't do anything that doesn't measure up to this impossible goal, and then again, they quit. And sometimes, and I put this in here because it's kind of a new addition to this list, And I want to be really careful how I talk about this, because I'm not saying that anxiety isn't real, and I'm not saying that anxiety isn't a massive, massive collective challenge in our culture right now. And I also see, though, some anxiety to me looks like inadequacy. That there's a learned pattern of, oh, if I have anxiety, then I get excused from being able to do the things that I need to do. Again, I'm treading on this very, very carefully, because oftentimes our response as parents when a child has anxiety is to be like, okay, well, you don't have to do that. I can see that that's triggering your anxiety. And that sometimes, if it's the mistaken motivation of anxiety, of inadequacy, we as parents have to really get in here and explore, how do we create healthy ways to work with anxiety so that it doesn't manifest or mask inadequacy. So here are some ways that you might react to the mistaken motivation of inadequacy. You might try a wide variety of approaches and feel discouraged. You might coax or remind. You might give up trying. You might stop making demands of that child, because every time you do, you just get up into this huge sticky mess of can they, can't they, I don't know, right? And you might find yourself doing things for this child that they could be doing for themselves. Something to pay attention to. Markers in the chart might include, over here, this white triangle on the left-hand side, an open spleen. Down here at the bottom, you'll see the white square at the bottom. This is an open root center. Sometimes can also be a source of inadequacy because the pressure is too much. Same thing up here with this white triangle pointing up. This is the head center. An open head center can also put somebody under a lot of pressure. An open G center. So you'll see here, this, again, we talked about this when we talked about lovability. This heart in the middle of the chart can sometimes lead to inadequacy. The gate 48, big culprit here, right? So if you look at this gate 48, this comes off the top left-hand side of the spleen. This is oftentimes a deep fear of inadequacy, and it can be paralyzing in adults and children. And if you go down to this bottom right image, there are circuits. The way these energies work in a chart, they run together in groups. Those are called circuits. This is a circuit called the miracle circuit, or the sensing circuit in traditional human design. Is a very right-brained way of feeling and sensing the world. And oftentimes these people who have this miracle sensing circuit, or pieces and parts of this miracle sensing circuit, because they think holistically and not necessarily linearly, they can feel overwhelmed, particularly in school, because in school we're very linear. We're conditioned to be very linear. And when we're conditioned to be so linear, and we're not, that's not our natural way of learning or knowing. We talked a little bit about this yesterday too. But the system, the school system is saying, oh, but you have to tell me in 3 paragraphs, what did you do this summer? And you're like, I don't know how to put all the stuff that I did this summer in order in a way that makes sense. That can sometimes be experienced as inadequacy. Last but not least, the mistaken motivation of revenge. Again, remember, if you have a kid that's doing revenge, sometimes it's very specific, related to a specific thing happening in your family. I think I shared with you on Monday that one of my clients whose dad was in the Secret Service, and he was actually at his grandfather's house when his grandfather passed away. That kid did revenge for a while, but it had nothing to do with his mom. And in fact, he only did it with his mom because that's where he felt safe. Because he couldn't do it with his dad, because his dad traveled all the time and his granddad was gone. And so mom got the brunt of the revenge, and it didn't have anything to do with her. And it took us a while to really untangle out of the grief and the lack of lovability and all the stuff that was going on with this kid. So a child with the mistaken motivation of revenge is usually a child that's tried the other 3 mistaken motivations first and hasn't gotten the response they needed. They might steal, they might be vicious, they might hurt children, animals, or themselves. They might blame others for their unfairness. They might believe that no one likes them. They might want to get even. They might make themselves unlikable, and they may feel like no one understands them. And if you have a child that's really chronically in revenge, to me, that's often a big red flag. And really, to me, that's oftentimes, I won't take a coaching client that has a child that's deep in revenge and has been there for a while, because usually to me that means there's something else going on in the dynamic. But it is good for you to understand for your own kids, because there may be a call here, if your child's doing revenge, to get some extra support and some help. So oftentimes when our children are doing revenge, we feel hurt, We get mad. We want to hurt back. We might dislike the kid. We might consider the child to be ungrateful. We may want to teach that child a lesson. We might ask other family members to avoid them, or we may report that child to the other parent in hopes that they will punish them, like right 1950s, 1960s parenting. Just wait till your dad gets home, right? Dad was the punishing. What a fun job, right? As a dad, yikes. Revenge markers in the chart can include bitterness on the projector, part of the projector. A projector that's tried and tried and tried and isn't being seen and recognized can get bitter and do revenge. Initiators, if they get their power shut down, if they are disempowered consistently, they will often slide into revenge. Again, an open G center, that's the heart in the middle of the chart. That's where you question your lovability. If you don't feel loved, you can slide into revenge. The gate 10, that's this gate right over here coming off the left side of the G center. That is the gate of blaming and self-love. And if you do not love yourself or you do not feel loved, you can get into revenge with this as well. And the channel 3740. That's this channel right here connecting the will center to the emotional solar plexus. That channel, oftentimes if you have parents in your life or people in your life who break agreements with you, who have not kept up their part of the deal, that can be very heartbreaking with this channel and can sometimes lead to revenge. Again, stressing here, these is correlations, not causations. Please don't look at charts and go, oh, this person has the 3740, they're probably going to do revenge, right? There are other factors that go into a child's life and child's behaviors in these feedback loops beyond the chart, but the charts give us a little bit of a way of interpreting what does this child really, really need so that we can be more effective in how we address those needs. If you learned something new today or this week, I want to share with you that what you learned was just the tip of the iceberg. That in our family coach certification training program, we go way, way deep. For example, when we talk about mistaken motivations in this program, we don't just diagnose, we talk about how do we fix the mistaken motivations. When we talk about child development in the family coach certification program, we don't just look at energy, we look at milestones, we look at what do we do as parents to really meet these needs and help our children through these seasons and cycles. We talk a lot about developmental, collective development and the evolution of humanity and how do we support children in an evolving world and much, much more. In fact, really when you're done with this program, you get an entire structured framework for how to work with parents and support parents from birth, actually from pregnancy, all the way through to adulthood. And we cover not only children and raising children in healthy families, we talk about complex topics like what happens when you have to co-parent or when families come apart. We bring in all kinds of relevant current topics as well. In this program, you're going to get tools and training to support you in integrating this framework. That includes modules with workbooks, live calls, and workshops to help you master the system. You're going to get certified in this training as a quantum human design level 1 and 2 specialist, a parenting by design facilitator facilitator. You're going to get the family coach certification as well as access to a private coaching community that includes mentorship and really an amazing group of people who are actively in there always talking about coaching and how do we work with families and what are trends that we see. You're going to learn how to work with kids in the education system, how to become advocates for children in the education system, how to even support communities in building alternatives for children. You're going to have impact and a clear career path if that's what you choose. You don't need to do that. This program is valuable and really, I think, irreplaceable for any parent in terms of being able to go deep, deep into your own parenting journey. But it's also a training that allows you to use this information as a professional path. So you're going to get a step-by-step framework that you can immediately use to serve families. We're going to help you grow your practice and we'll show you how to generate income. And you're going to get multiple streams of income in all the different certifications that we give you. So you can do readings, you can do coaching, you can teach. You're going to be able to do so many different things, and none of it is stuff you have to figure out yourself. We're actually going to give you very easy step-by-step frameworks to follow to do this for yourself. So you're going to get 8 recorded training modules plus a workbook, 10 live Q&A calls with me and Hannah You're going to get a special kickoff community call. You're going to get a Parenting by Design 2-day live workshop. You're going to get Quantum Human Design certification levels 1 and 2. You're going to become a Parenting by Design facilitator, and that includes all the materials you need to teach the Parenting by Design program. This is a program that only you can teach. I'm not teaching this program ever anymore. And you'll get the opportunity then to share that program in your community or online. You'll become part of our private family coach on the Circle community. That's a private online community. It's not on social media. And if you add all this up, that's easily worth over $10,000. This program, the registration is available and open until September the 26th. Regularly, this is a $4,997 program. This is a live cohort special registration opening. We're going to give you, as our way of thanking you for being part of this group, being part of our Masterclass series, a 33% discount on tuition. That means you're going to save $1,649. We'll post the information for you if you want to register in chat, or you need the link in chat. The coupon code expires on September the 26th. I did not bring my hoodie because I wore it last night and it got dirty. But if you look down below, the first 18 people to pay in full are going to receive an Army of Love hoodie. Everybody loves our hoodies. So you'll get an Army of Love hoodie. We don't sell these. These are just bonuses that we give away to people when they register and they make, they make that bold decision. You'll also get access to our Passion and Profit program. This is an incredible program where if you want to build a business doing this work, we'll show you exactly how. We'll show you how to build your website, how to integrate the human design software onto your website. We'll show you how to do marketing, how to set up your payment systems, how to get clients. Our goal is to make sure that you leave the Passion and Profit program with everything you need to get started building a thriving coaching practice. So take a moment, if you will, if you haven't already done so. I forgot to tell you this at the beginning. Go down to the Q&A button at the bottom of the page. If you have questions, parenting questions, any kind of question that you have, post them in the Q&A, and I'll take the next 27 minutes and answer your questions. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Dr. Karen. All right, let's dive in here. Okay, first question. If someone has a lot of open centers, is it possible that they're mirroring or amplifying the motivations of others in their space instead of the motivations being their own?
I would say yes, and also they're not going to know the difference. And so you still want to treat it the same way. You still want to recognize it for what it is. So let's say if you have a kid that has a lot of openness and you are a manifester and you have a need for power, and they're taking in your need for power and they're amplifying it and they're acting out the mistaken motivation of power, you're still going to treat it as if it's power and not get too deep into, well, they haven't opened this and they haven't opened that. I think look, we need it to be simple when we're parenting in the trenches, right? You don't want to sit there and try to figure out, wait, is this their chart or is this mine? Is it, just handle it as power.
Okay, does the child's motivations change over time or in different situations?
They can. And that's why, again, when we go back to the window pane, you don't want to only look at mistaken motivations. You want to look at what's going on in the chart. You want to look at where are they developmentally, right? It's so normal for 2-year-olds and 14-year-olds to do the mistaken motivation of power. Start to weave all that together. Like you have a manifester who's 2, who's doing the mistaken motivation of power. And we put in your own personal conditioning, and you weren't allowed to backtalk to your parents. And now this 2-year-old is like out here being a little dictator in the family, right? Your response to that is going to be influenced also by your own conditioning. So yes, they can change. And generally speaking, you'll have a kid that will tend to pick one mistaken motivation that they become an expert in over time.
Okay, let's see. Are the power markers in the chart the parents, the child's, or both?
It's generally the child's or your own. And that's the piece that I want to just throw out here. So for example, again, going back to the window pane, and this is why it's so important to never just look at the chart, right? You might have a kid that does power because let's say they've got power markers in their chart. And let's say, again, you come from a family where you were raised in an autocratic family, where the boundaries were really firm and rigid, where you had to say yes ma'am, no ma'am, and the rules were very clear, and you felt really disempowered in that family structure. If you bring that into that environment, plus let's say you've got power markers in your chart, you can start to see there's a whole complex there of factors that contribute to that system, and where power is becoming an issue in that system. And again, first of all, of course, diagnosing the mistaken motivation is so important. But then also, once you're out of the heat of the moment, especially if it's a chronic issue, taking a step back and looking at that window pane and saying, okay, we have a power dynamic in this relationship. And yes, it's in the chart. And yes, this is a 2-year old. And yes, this is the mistaken motivation of power. And also, I have a power story that I need to really look at, because I'm bringing my own issues around power into my relationship with my child. And we do that. We do that. And that's not a shameful thing. That's a human thing. And having that understanding allows us to start to tell that story in a little bit of a different way.
Okay, what is the most important step parents can take to earn their child's trust?
Oh, that's such a big one. I mean, there's so many things related to that, because trust can also be a chart issue. Okay? Because certain aspects in the chart, like being a fourth line profile, for example, or a first line profile, can make trust a bigger issue. So certainly I would say, to show up and build trust with your child, be present. Number one, be present. And make sure that you are creating focused time for your child every day. And I'll tell you what that means. That means put this thing away. Put this thing away, because it's too easy for us to get seduced by the immediacy of that and to lose our presence with our kids. Number two, don't make idle threats. And especially in disciplinary settings, like, don't say something like, well, if you do that, we're not going to Disneyland, right? They're not going to listen to you, and they're not going to trust you when you give them a consequence. And number three, don't go back on your word. Keep your word. Keep your word. But really, I think the thing is, sometimes we make parenting really complicated, especially, when our kids are little. Our kids don't really need that much. They just want us to be there. Presence is the greatest gift you can give your kids. And it's tricky. It's tricky because it's a hard job. It's a really hard job. You know that being a stay-at-home parent is valued at $195,000 a year as a job. If you did that as a job, that's how much you theoretically could get paid, but you don't get paid, right? And it's 24/7, and you're in the thick of it. And sometimes you're doing it without support. You don't have friends. Maybe you don't have family. Maybe you're trying to do something else on the side. It's a hard, hard job. And it's hard to be present to playing Legos for hours on end, right? And so, again, I said this on Monday, I said this yesterday, I'm going to say it again. The greatest gift you can give your kids to get them to trust you is take care of yourself first, so that your resource bank is full, so that you can show up in a way that's consistent and be present. Because if you fall behind in your own self care, if your bank gets empty, you can't be present, because you'll be struggling. So you need sleep, you need food, you need water. You're like a plant, right? And you need to have some fun that restores and replenishes your soul, so that you can be a better parent. And that's hard. It's hard, especially in a culture that teaches us to will our way through exhaustion. Don't do that with your parenting.
Okay, does the training include one-to-one coaching, or are the live calls group calls?
They are group calls, although, again, the community support that we have in these programs, and the friends you make in the cohort, and the support from people who have graduated the program in our circle community is really, really powerful. You are not going to be unsupported in the training at all.
Yeah. And I will say that too, a lot of our students will also connect. And even after we do conclude our live calls, which you can always come join us for our QHT forum calls, you're always going to have a space to bring your questions and ask live to Karen, be in community. That call is year round that you have access to. So even after your cohort ends and we know that there's time that you need to integrate and kind of get yourself set up or structured. You do have a lot of that support that is here year round for you. And a lot of our students even like to go off and form their own study group or
Yeah.
they'll go back and they'll go through the modules again because there's just so much, it's so rich and it's a continuing evolving journey. So just wanted to add that in as well. Let's see. I have adult children. Would this course be more suitable for me or the inner child healing course? So let's clarify that. There is no inner child
Yeah.
healing.
We don't have an inner child healing course. We are going to do just a pop-up class next week on inner child stuff, but it's definitely not a healing course per se. So we don't really have a an inner child healing course. You'll definitely learn a lot about inner child work. Certainly, you'll learn a lot about your adult children. You will also learn about younger children. You will learn about maybe rewriting some of your own story with your own parenting. And it'll set you up to be a good grandparent and be a really good resource for others, even your own kids. So,
Okay, what do you say are the main things that drive the need for attention?
the need for attention. I mean, so I would say there. So some of it is going to depend on the kid. As I said, different kids. I always say attention's like a cup, right? Your kid needs to get their cups full, and kids are born with different size cups. I mean, I've had kids that have massive, like big gulps, slurpy cups, and I have one kid that's like, don't look at me, I'm fine, leave me alone, right? So some of it's going to depend on the kid. And some of it's going to honestly depend on when you're with this child, are you actually present versus are you just parking your body there to hold space? And that's a difficult but a very important, honest assessment. And here's the thing let's go back to the cup analogy. If you have a kid that has a big attention cup, think of it like a coffee cup, right? If you're really tired and you've got a headache because you're sleep deprived and you're like dragging yourself out of bed in the morning, and you go downstairs and you grab your cup and you like point it towards your husband or your wife or your partner, and they give you like a drop of coffee and you're like, and you suck it up, right? And you're like, more. And they give you another drop, right? And you suck it up. We tend to approach our children's need for attention kind of like, your husband giving you a drop of coffee, which by the way, my husband would be killed if he did that, right? You want a whole cup. Your kids' need for attention is like that cup. They want a whole cup. And so sometimes it means, as counterintuitive as it is, we're like cooking dinner and we got stuff and we're on a schedule and our kids doing inappropriate attention. Sometimes you can actually save yourself time and fill your kid's cup by just turning off the stove and being like, I'm gonna grab some beef jerky out of the pantry. Let's sit down and let's read some books and fill that cup up so that that need to keep coming into the kitchen and interrupting you drop by drop by drop gets eliminated because now the cup is full. Here's the other thing I just want to say, especially when you start tackling these mistaken motivations, it's pretty common in the beginning when you start handling them for the behavior to actually get worse before it gets better. Because these kids, your kids have been in this feedback loop. They've learned, like, I'm going to come in and I'm going to bug my mom while she's fixing dinner because she's kind of held captive in the kitchen. She can't really do anything. Again, they're not doing this on purpose. This is unconscious. And they're coming in and they're in this pattern. And if all of a sudden you're not following the pattern anymore, because now you're like, oh, I see what this is, and I'm gonna make sure that after dinner we get some good time together, right? And they're like, oh wait, the pattern's not working anymore. What they do in the beginning is sometimes power up on the misbehavior because now they're like, oh, well, I must be needing to do it more because the pattern's not working until they realize, oh, it's not working anymore. But you know what? I am getting my cup filled over here on a regular basis. Cool. I don't need to do the misbehavior thing anymore. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to interrupt the pattern.
Okay, and just sort of as a follow-up to that, do you have any suggestions for how to apply this information to adults in our life who are still actually manifesting these behaviors, such as parents or in-laws?
Yes. I mean, honestly, you handle it just like you do with kids, right? Like I shared with you all that my husband has an open throat and grew up in a house where everybody's clamoring for attention in that family, right? Because of the design. It's not personal. They have this thing. And by the way, their dad was a projector. So he also needed attention and recognition. So there's like this whole intergenerational dynamic around attention in that family. So I have learned to handle my husband's need for attention just like I would with my middle daughter, who also has a high need for recognition and attention. And literally, I know, as I said, I got to be proactive in making sure that his cup gets filled. He feels loved when I make time as soon as he comes in the door to sit down with him or go for a walk with him. We take the dogs out and we go for a walk and we walk and talk, which is good for me as a manifesting generator, right? And so when I can tackle that proactively, number one, I'm giving him what he needs to feel loved and seen. And my God, do I want to give that to that man, right? That I want to give that to that man. Number two, it's healing for him. Like he's learned, we've been together for 20 years. I mean, he's learned now at this point in time that he's so important to me. And so some of the more inappropriate things he was doing in the beginning of our relationship to get attention, he doesn't do anymore. Like he knows not to be provocative. He has this thing, he listens to the news 24/7. Again, I'm like, no news, no news. So he used to do this thing where the first thing he'd do, he'd come in and goes, what's on the news today? And he'd start telling me about the news. And I'd be like, I don't want to hear about the news. I don't want this in my bubble, right? And he has learned now that he gets attention appropriately and he doesn't need to be provocative, which is, as I said, is in his chart to get attention. So
Okay, there is
I hope
one.
that helps.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. There's a lot of those types of questions here. Relating to the certification process. So how we do certification for the training. I can speak to that.
Yeah,
So
okay, you handle that one. That
yeah, so with quantum human design, since that is part of this program, if you do not have levels 1 and 2 of the QHD training, that's where you're going to learn energy type, profiles, centers, strategy, authority, really understanding the foundations of the chart. So in that part of the program, you have quizzes that you are completing with your lessons that just short show that reflection that you're following the information and all of that. And then in the family coach program, you have a case study that is a real example of a family dynamic, some charts for you to look at. We incorporate mistake and motivation into that. We look at what are you seeing in these charts? How would you provide some practical strategies to address this? How can you look at self-care? So there's really more of a comprehensive component to that at the end of the family coach program. You do not need to certify within a year or a certain amount of time. You really have the opportunity to go at your pace and complete it. That being said, we do check up on you. We want to be sure that you are following along to the best of your ability and capacity, and don't want you to just fall off the wheel, So we want you to be completing, and also we know life happens. We know family stuff comes up. We know people move. They have to take health sabbatical or whatever it is. And so we really work with our students in our community. We want to see you grow and be successful. We don't want this to feel like you're isolated and alone. We also don't want you to just kind of let it slide by. So that is how we do the certification here. And there was another question about the program. Let me see here. Where did it go? Oh, okay. So I hope that helps in terms of answering that. And then I do want to read Kelly's comment here. Um, Okay, hi Kelly, we see you. She was a student. She's been in our family coach program. She just says, I just want to say a huge thank you and a reflection for this course. That power and attention stuff was huge with me and my son. Once I realized what were my own issues, then I was able to recognize that my son's open will was reflecting back my own defined will, and it is strong. And wow, did he have a lot to contend with when he was young. The parenting journey is really a healing journey, and I would have had a different path if I had this parenting HD info. So,
Oh, thank you for that, Kelly. I'm glad you and your son are doing better. And I think that is one of the many benefits of the training program is you will take this home to your own family and they will become your living laboratory, but in a really good way, for sure. Yeah.
okay, and then a couple questions about when we are doing this again, if we are running this program again. Um,
I mean, part of me is like, who knows? Every
it's
day I
really
wake up and
true.
I'm like, what is happening on this planet? I don't know, right? But in theory, we teach this program every 2 years. So we will not be teaching this program again until late 2027. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, to sign up now because you'll be waiting a little bit before we bring this around again. So I want to just tackle this because there's a question in the chat that came up and I saw it also in the Q&A. The question
Mhm.
was, how do you help with inadequacy and motivation or inadequacy motivation? There's a whole lot that we would talk about and I would teach you to do in the family coach training program, but here's just sort of a quick trip. Usually when a kid has mistaken motivation of inadequacy, they're overwhelmed. And they're oftentimes really, it's sort of like they don't know where to tackle the problem. And so a really good strategy to really work with inadequacy is exploring, how can I support my child in learning how to break this big thing down into little bite-sized chunks. And so really sitting with the kid and helping them explore, how do we do this? Like, think about Legos. I mean, and I realize that other kids are not, bigger kids are not going to have Legos, but think of it as a metaphor. Like when all the Legos are out on the floor and you tell your kid pick up the Legos, they're like, what? Too much, right? And so if they have the mistaken motivation of inadequacy, then you might start with, okay, let's start first with the blue Legos. Let's pick up all the blue Legos. Now let's pick up the yellow Legos. And now let's pick up the green Legos. Are there green Legos? I guess so. Now let's pick up the red Legos, right? So you want to help them learn to break things down into smaller, manageable steps. So
Any tips on parenting an ego manifester?
that is a child that needs a lot of power and a child that also needs a lot of rest. And so you have two things. Number one, you've got to support them in learning how to dial into their own body and feel into, do I have the energy for this or not? And that's a long-term parenting goal when you're parenting an orchestrator. A manifestor initiator. So you want to help them find those spaces between rest and activation. And then you're going to have to parent them in a way that keeps them intact with their power. And when we're parenting manifestors, we have to first of all teach them to inform, which is hard because they're afraid to inform, because they're afraid that if they inform, you're going to tell them, nope, you can't do that, right? And so you have to find that dynamic of really giving them enough space to where there's yeses in your conversation, so that they don't associate informing with being shut down, right? So you have to get them to inform and give them good yeses, and also save those no's. You really want to save those no's from when you really need to use them. You don't want to just say no to little things because you really need them to explore their power. And then, anything that you might do, depending on where they are developmentally, to manage power effectively. And that can be give them choices. That can be, really getting clear, like what's worth fighting for and what's not worth fighting for in your relationship, particularly with teenagers, right? Because sometimes we get down to the nitty gritty with teenagers when we just need to let it go. And for you as a parent, getting yourself into the habit of asking yourself, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I let this child do this, right? And really letting them become more and more responsible for the consequences of their choices as they grow, right? And it also means figuring out there are certain things that you cannot make a child do. You cannot make a child pee or poop. You can't make them do it. No way. You cannot make a child sleep no matter how much you wish you could, right? And you cannot force a child to eat, and you can't make a kid do homework. Those are the four things like you can't do. And if you don't find appropriate ways for them to feel powerful, those will be the four areas where they will power struggle and they'll win. And so you've got to go underneath and look at, okay, in the dynamics of this family, how do we get this kid power? And again, that's a whole module. And in the parenting program, or if you don't want to take the parenting program, go find one of our practitioners who are teaching the Parenting by Design program, because you'll learn how to teach that in the Parenting Design program too. Parenting by Design program. Go take a Parenting by Design class, because in that class we talk about how do you work with power and the need for power in an ego manifestor or any kid that has the mistaken motivation of power.
Hey, are there ways or behaviors for parents to prevent misbehavior?
No. I mean, you'll never have a kid that doesn't misbehave ever because they're learning. They just got here, right? But when you understand their design, you learn how to parent them by design. When you learn to be present, when you learn how to adopt a parenting style that's not autocratic and not permissive, you can be in the middle and learn how to parent kind of like be flexible and at the same time hold boundaries as necessary. Do your own inner work. That's the hard part, right? Do your own inner work. You can have less friction than you would if you don't do those pieces, for sure. But no, you'll never prevent it. They're supposed to make mistakes.
I'll always be on children's side. I love that,
Yes, you will. And that's what we
Alicia.
love about you, Alicia.
Okay. Cope. I'm just looking at some of the other questions here. Okay, Chris says, my autistic nephew is getting bigger now and he is patting people on the head. He's 6 feet tall and the mental capacity of a 4-year-old. He's not verbal. His pats are intentionally severe, but he feels that he has the ability to go there and does. His mom really wants him to be able to go to school, but this behavior will prevent that. I'll
Mm,
suggest she listens to this replay.
hmm hmm Yeah, I mean, I think this is the other beautiful part about the mistaken motivations is it applies to all children, right? And actually can be very specific to certain parts of childhood and certain conditions that can happen. So say for example, if you have a child that is going through a chronic illness, that's oftentimes a child that learns inadequacy as a mistaken motivation. And so you have to start exploring in those dynamics, how do I get this child a sense of capacity and capability in an arena where they feel like they don't have any control or any capability over anything going on around them. So awesome. All right.
Right. I am just being mindful of time here. I have the winners to announce for
Yes, and our poll. So if we can put our poll up, if you will, please. Again, if you give me feedback about our program, our 3-day program that we did, our masterclass series, any feedback you give me helps me make sure that I'm on target with what I give you. So please, I appreciate you taking the time to fill out our poll and to really help us know that we're steering this in the right direction for you. So please take a moment and fill out our poll. And of course, that means I have to figure out how to turn it on.
Sorry, I thought I did that. I was looking at the wrong thing. Okay.
And
Today's
then don't go away. We have recipients today, our giveaway recipients. So, Hannah, take it away.
yes, congratulations to Megan Posner and Miranda Shields. You are our day 2 winners. So our team will be reaching out to you for you to receive your beautiful stack of quantum human design books.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes. Thank you all for just joining us on this 3-day journey. We will see you hopefully on October 8th for the kickoff call of the Family Coach Training, if
Yes,
not sooner.
absolutely. Absolutely. Don't forget, register soon and you get your hoodie. So, all right, you all, thank you all again for your feedback. Thank you for joining me. Be well, take good care of yourselves. Happy parenting. Join us on the Facebook group, and we'll see you soon. Bye.